Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer and this is Strange Mosaic, and I'm super excited because one of my favorite guests from last year is back. I got so many compliments on the show we did together in terms of sort of the mental jujitsu and whatever that we were doing from listeners, and whether they sort of agreed with your perspective or not, or agreed with my perspective or not, just like watching us sort of engage in that mental sharpening of one another. People really enjoyed it, and it was one of my favorite shows of the year. So I'm super happy to have you back. Danny Goler, welcome back. Nice to see you, my friend.
We're great to be back. Thank you so much, Emily. Thank you for having me on.
Absolutely. So yeah, I enjoyed our show quite a bit, and I knew I would, but there was like a level of synchronicity that arose naturally throughout the course of the conversation that sort of only ever arises when, sort of people are floating around on the same layer of density in this reality, kind of thing. And so I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I'm excited for you to kind of catch us up on where you are at with what you've been doing. I know you spent last year traveling the world and now you're back home. I want to kind of hear sort of about what your how that has sort of influenced the way you're thinking about things, as well as the kind of feedback and interaction you've been getting based on the work with the laser and the molecule and all of this kind of stuff. And I thought maybe we could talk about some of that in the first hour, and then in the second hour I have some further synchronicities and interesting questions to pose to you that are maybe
All the extra juicy stuff.
all the extra juicy stuff. But like, sometimes I say that because I don't want the people that I do shows with necessarily to suffer for something that is really an Emily problem and not a them problem, right? So sometimes I put it over there just to save their reputation with whoever their desired audience is, right? Anywho, okay, so just like update us a little bit on did your travels have anything to do with this? Like, just for people who didn't
Everything has to do with this because I guess it's my life's journey at this point. So I met some people along the way that are involved in these domains to different extents. And that you can call that influencing it. The trip was originally, the idea was just to kind of travel the world before we have kids.
Yep.
And I'm glad we did. Since we came back, I obviously also, I travel for work and things like that, but it's more like home based now. And yeah, so it definitely touched upon it. I met some interesting people. Some of them are, involved directly with the molecules research. And some people that are more, I guess, psychedelic space adjacent, so maybe more like spiritual circles, or people that are, they have certain abilities. So talk to them, document this stuff. And we're actually working on a documentary right now with an incredible documentarian, Aaron Vanden. He's just when you will see, I don't know if you ever see the teaser? We were like sending it around. We haven't made it public yet, but yeah, he's an incredible mind. And so we're going to present it in a very beautiful way. We're kind of retracing the steps, going and shooting, like, for example, that scene that I told you next to Pierce College. I remember
Yep.
because you told me that you grew up there. And we went and reconstructed the scene. We kind of followed me around exactly what I did and how I saw the first numbers and all that stuff. Talked about it, kind of walk and talk. We're gonna have interesting interviews in the film. We have some known scientists lined up, and also people of different domains. So when I was traveling the world, I've gathered some materials of people that I've interacted with, and we're going to use some of that in the film. So yeah, definitely, I would say it definitely contributed to it.
Couple things. I'll tell you this now. I was afraid, like during our conversation last time, there was one step farther I thought about taking it, but I was like, this guy's gonna think I'm absolutely batshit if I say this, so I'm not gonna say it. But like, I've crossed. I no longer care if anyone thinks I'm batshit, right? So the part that I didn't tell you was that same intersection that we're talking about, where you saw the spray paint on the sidewalk and you saw the stoplight outside of Pierce College. When I was a kid, there was a guy named William who used to hang out there, and he was like one of these guys that's like kind of homeless guy, but hangs out with a lot of intellectuals, right? He hung around the college. Sometimes I would see him like dining in fancy restaurants or out in Los Angeles, but then he also was like sleeping on the street. But he used to hang out on that corner, and he swore that there was like transmissions coming through his tooth from outer space right there, right?
I
I
should give
swear to
this a
God, I
try.
called my dad after the show. I'm like, dude, who was that guy that used to hang out right outside of Pierce College? And he had to remind me of his name.
Oh, oh, he had the name. That's interesting. Because
Well,
usually
my
people.
dad was a like a dean, an administrator, and a teacher at
Oh,
Pierce
I
College.
didn't know that.
Yeah,
Yes, I have a good he's deceased now, but he was a professor at Pierce College for a long time. He was a good family friend. Qasem I think Nabulsi was his last name. His name
Qasim Nabulsi. I'll ask my dad. I'm sure he knows him.
Yeah, yeah, he knows him for sure. He was
Okay.
he passed away, I think, a year and a half ago or something, but he was
Okay.
one of these like wonderful people. So
Yep. I'll ask
yeah.
my dad. My dad worked at Pierce College from the 70s until he retired. Like
He knew him 100%. He was a very known, he was a political science professor.
my dad
He,
too.
yeah, so UCLA and Pierce College was one of his main, yeah.
Okay, I'll ask my dad about that. But yeah, my dad used to be like an administrator there and a teacher, and then eventually he ended up working for the district, but still taught political science, right? You know, one time a week when you know, because he enjoyed the interaction with the students and whatnot. So Pierce College is a really interesting place. I think there's like a lot more stuff going on under the ground there than what people would expect. You know, there's the whole farm there, right? You've seen the whole like there's the whole part of the campus that's a
You
farm.
revealing here today that there's an extension of Area 51 under Pierce College?
Something kind of like it. The whole I think the whole San Fernando Valley is basically got, you know, sort of a reverse universe underneath.
I did not know that, but okay.
Anyhow,
I wouldn't be surprised.
so okay, so when I asked you about the parts about if traveling had anything to do with it, just for people who didn't catch our show last time, the public portion is on this same YouTube channel where you'll be watching this. You guys can go check it out. Danny discovered that there is a code running through our reality that is visible when you use a diffracted laser while you're on the molecule. You will see it in between the laser and any surface you project the laser against. You will see this code running through reality. So
Right.
when I asked you the question about whether the travels had anything to do with it, I was wondering if you were wanting to see if the code was different in different locations, right? Like by moving around the world, were you observing the same code all the time, or was it different?
So there's only one more place in which I actually, oh no, there's two more places in the world. Actually, no, three. Wait. Yeah, three different places in the world in which I also saw the code. As far as I can tell, no. We saw it in Brazil, we saw it in Costa Rica, we saw it in Ibiza. And oh, and in Spain, in Madrid. So no, the code looks the same always. It doesn't matter what surface you projected, it always looks the same. In fact, this is one of these things that I'm there's also there's the the public relations part of the project, which is like more the documentary now. There's also the actual like experimentation of it. And on the experimentation side, this is one of the things I'm most heavily focused on at the moment, which is trying to figure out, can we, I think I told you this last time, but back then it was still kind of hovering ideas. Now I have some dialed in specifics that I want to try, and we're on working on manifesting them. One of them is using powerful magnetic fields to see if we can create any agreeable change. Measurable is still not a word we can use at the moment, because at the moment it seems that the only tool to measure it is a human perception, which is problematic for the way that current scientific zeitgeist views the whole endeavor of objectivity. But we'll get there. This is where the public relation part works. We'd like to re-educate the public to try and help them understand that actually it's an constantly evolving ground where we understand things, and it's always a combination of perception and a theoretical framework and then measurements. So it's the observer is never outside of that domain. There's this I would go as far as to call it a delusion in the scientific community today, that somehow we are measuring things objectively when a device is measuring them, and before, because of that, they are more objective. It is true that it's a much more rigid regularity in nature, but it is not true that somehow the observer is not involved. Not in the sense of influencing it. So we're not talking what the blip do we know level of perception of reality here, but in the sense that it, unless you have the perception of it, it comes across as a something that is then goes through all the channels of the human mind to try and understand, build models around it. All of that has to be factored in the understanding, and that is a much more difficult thing to communicate. I'm saying all of this is because to the extent of seeing different codes, one of the attempts now is to see if we can produce some kind of an effect that is agreeable by everybody, that we see the same change. To use an example, one of the things I'm looking at right now is to try and produce something along the lines of 3.5 Teslas, which is very powerful magnetism. It's not, you don't have natural magnets that do this, so you need an electromagnet. I found this device that we don't know yet if it's going to deliver, but it's advertised as being able to produce 3.5 Teslas. It's like 15 grand, which after I spoke to a friend of mine who's a physicist, he said, this actually doesn't make any sense. He said, like, I doubt it actually works, but because he said that the equipment they have in the university costs like $150,000, so literally 10 times more, and it barely produces that. So he's like, I don't, and we have to cool it down for 2 days. We have to put it in complete, vacuum. It's like what he said, if this works, you found, like, I don't know what you found, but this is great because what I found is like just this device that basically, kind of like maybe yay high as far as like a standing person, and it's just like a thing you roll in the room, and it's supposed to be able to produce this amount of magnetism. And when you produce enough magnetism, depending on the specific material, there's something you can produce on an element that's called the Zeeman effect, which essentially, you know what orbitals are of an atom, right? So what it does, it essentially creates suborbitals. So it creates more orbitals, which on the surface of it's just like a so what thing, right? Like we know about this. This is a very known effect. But what I think, and I don't know if I can, specifically break down why I think this, like in a short enough period, but what I believe that can happen is that if we create the Zeeman effect while either just by itself or projecting the lasers to a particular material, which again, I think I told you this last time, I think bismuth is our winner, but we'll find out. Uh, we should be able to see a measurable change to the way the code looks in a way that you and I will agree, or like, oh, wow, like we see this exact change happening. And if we can do something like this, that takes you to a different level of confidence of, oh, you're dealing with something real. Because we did like a physical thing, even though magnetism, we don't think of it as physical, but it's part of the physical world. And it did something to the code that is measurable and something you can reproduce. So this is actually one of the biggest focuses I'm thinking. But as far as to your original question, no, the code seems to be always the same. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you do. People always email me because they immediately like, well, can you try tell it that you love it and all that? It's like, I don't think I don't. No, no. It's and listen. I at first I laughed actually too, but then I was like, who, dude, who
Why
knows
not
at this
try it?
point?
Yeah.
Like, who knows at this point, right?
Right.
And what's interesting is that, again, I know that some of these things we did speak about last time, but it may be good to recapitulate for people that haven't watched that episode. People do email me that they see sometimes code one of the most common emails I get is, I see the code without the molecule, or I see the code without the laser. I say that's one of the most common emails I get. I get like hundreds of them. And it is true, and I see it too when I'm on the molecule. I also see other code. It's not other, but it looks a little different in the sense that it's bigger. It's more kind of like subsumed in the surface, so you can see it without the laser. Some people claim to be able to see it because maybe they're more sensitive spiritually or whatever is the deal with them, right? Um, some people see it right before they fall asleep or wake up, so they see it in the back of their eyelids. They see, I see code. What is interesting about this code, to anybody who's listening and is experiencing this phenomena, what I want you to try is to see if you can, if that code that you're seeing is malleable. And if you can see that you can change it with your attention, like make it something else, make it into numbers, make it into, then it is not the type of code that you see in the laser. In the laser, it is highly specific, super concrete in its existence, has its own special coordinates and behavior, does not care where you are. So it's not like because you're going to move your head, all of a sudden it's going to do something different. It cares nothing about you. And again, I know we used this example before, but it really looks like you're looking through a microscope.
Yeah.
It's just a world. It does not care about what you do. It does not care about what you feel. It's just there. And
It's
that is the thing that is so different about it.
okay, so a couple of things. So I want to ask you a few questions about the code, and then I want to do that since we're there now, and then I want to go back to the magnet in just a minute because it connects to something we talked about last time. Okay, so a couple of questions about the code. I also know people who I've seen all kinds of weird things, but I instinctively, without you having to explain it, know that the code that they're talking about that they see is not the same one. Like I have friends who like used to say, like if they took good ecstasy at parties, they could see code like floating through the room, like, right? Like it was passing on through, checking things out, or, you know, whatever. And it would look like code at first, and then it might look like some sort of like dragon, and then it would be code again or whatever. Yeah. That I know what that is also, and it's not the same thing, I don't think. Now, I have the laser, but I haven't done it because the molecule has not made itself present in my reality. And I'm one of these people, based on my own history and experience with these kinds of things, there's a way that I need to approach it, or it needs to approach me for me to know that like this is the timing is right.
Absolutely.
And there's
Yep.
a way that it's not, and it is literally like I've done everything. I've tried. There's like not. I've tried all the drugs.
Yep.
I've done all the crazy things in life. This one, when the timing is right, I know it will appear, and I just am cool with that. So I've got the laser. So when it happens, I'm ready, right? But so I haven't actually seen the code, but like instinctively, like I understand what's being talked about here. Now let me ask you a few questions because I haven't seen the code, the one that you're talking about, with my own eyes. When you say it's the same everywhere, do you mean that it's made up of the same characters everywhere, or like literally it's the exact same sentences everywhere?
The average distribution of it is the same everywhere.
Average distribution, and the way that it like moves or doesn't move, or whatever it
Yeah,
is.
so and what I mean by that's a great question. What I mean by average distribution is from all the prospects, content, behavior, movement, density, all of it, right?
Okay.
And it's not like you can actually make up any sentences because it's kind of like looking at, people always say, transcribe it, and it's really you always gets a chuckle out of me because so, yeah, this is like millions of characters. They're
Right,
moving at
right, right,
the
right.
same
Yes.
speed.
I
It's
didn't
like
really mean
transcribe
like,
what?
I didn't
Oh
really
no, no,
mean
no.
to
I'm
read the
just yeah,
sentence.
of
Yeah.
course. I'm just telling you so
Yeah.
you it helps you visualize that there's so much going on at once. So it's kind of like are you by any chance dyslexic?
I'm dyslexic with typing. Like I type the word in reverse, but I'm not with
Yeah.
reading. Yeah.
No, okay, so what I am, and I know there's like gradation of it. So like if I focus, I mean I read and everything, but it takes me much longer because of it. But if it's really bad, either because of I'm tired or whatever the reason is, and I know that people just have it naturally worse, right? It literally like you looking, sometimes you look at the sentence, it's a sentence, you just can't
Yes.
read, okay?
Yeah.
That's exactly what it feels like. It's like you clearly it's a thing, right? Like it's
Right.
just like there's no questions about it, and yet you cannot like take it and then now I had a few people that managed to draw some of it,
I was
and we
gonna
used
ask.
some of
Okay.
these illustrations in the film. It does look very much like Japanese katakana, just like in the Matrix, mixed up with some Hebrew letters and mixed up with some what appears to be regular numbers from 0 to 5, about 5. Now, when I'm saying all of these things, um, you know, all of that is just kind of like looks like. That's the closest thing it looks like. It just looks like an alien language, basically. But it's a language, and this is a crucial distinction. People always send me, for example, the Allison Gray characters. And to anybody who doesn't know, you can put it on the screen. Alison Gray, she's Alex's Gray's wife. He's a famous artist. She's also a famous artist. And she drew these famous, if you do Alison Gray language, you'll see what I mean. She, under the influence, drew this one day, and it was like very concrete for her, and she drew it. And ever since, people kind of, it's a meme now. Like people talk about it endlessly, especially in the psychedelic community.
Yep.
And she would be the first one to tell you that she thinks it means nothing. She just
Okay.
thinks, okay, I just had a visual hallucination of some sort.
Yep.
But I want to emphasize that the code does not look like the Alison Gray characters.
Okay.
Are you showing it up? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It does not look like that. Okay. And what's more is that if this is what the language would look like in the laser, I wouldn't even think anything special about it
Okay.
because this is extremely blocky. It's
Right.
very easy to believe that because the wall is made of a particular pattern, the
Right.
molecule essentially arranges it into these neat little shapes.
Yep.
Okay, it doesn't look like a language; it looks like shapes. Maybe
Right.
like ancient language, sure. There are languages that look like that, but
Yes.
it doesn't look like a sophisticated modern language, and
Right.
that is very different. Now,
Okay.
for example, I don't know if you can do it side by side or just now pull up just Japanese katakana.
Okay. Kata. There we
Yeah,
go. I see it. Okay.
exactly how it's
There we go.
yeah.
All right.
And then pull up one of the images. Okay, now look how much more sophisticated this is, right?
Yes.
And this is not like they're kind of like, uh, do I see it? Do I not? No, like straight up, imagine seeing it that clearly, like a digital clock that just like turns a bunch of them in like different patterns, right? And they're not random. You see rotation around these orbs, you see rotation around columns, you see what there's uh not predictable, but clearly an ordered behavior of this the movement, and it has a life to it. It feels like almost like an organic material that kind of
Yep.
like this thing.
Yep.
So this is the difference that I want to emphasize because it really is the thing that makes the difference. At first, people see structures, they see something that kind of looks like the Alison Gray characters, maybe, but I would
Right.
submit that it's just clumps of the code. The code is like very tiny in the beginning.
Okay.
Only when you see the actual characters that kind of look like that, that's the holy crap moment. That's when people go, whoa. And this we rely heavily in the film on people's reactions because I think that we are very good at feeling what other people feel strongly. And there's an unfakeable moment there that I've now seen personally hundreds of times,
Yep.
that when people move from just seeing the structures in which they're kind of like, oh, cool, wow, that is cool, that is cool. Then they see the language and they go, wait, what? What is that? Whoa, dude, what?
Yeah.
That
Yep.
that is
Yep.
different,
Yep.
okay? And
Yep.
that is this is for me a data point actually, because people say, well, look, people can be confused. Like, right. But people can also be not confused, right? And then that you're forgetting that part of the equation because people, for the most, we're actually pretty good at kind of collecting what is truly what truly is essential to what needs to happen. Now, when we can be flamboyant about a lot of things, but this kind of response that I've just acted out a little bit, it's reserved for either true awe or true moment of like, wait, like the person stopped acting. There's no more acting. There's no
Right.
like, wow, there's more like, dude, what the fuck? Like there's just this like moment. And that's because your brain it stops when there's something that you're like, whoa, wait a second. I need what? Like I did not expect this. Right. So that to me that's by the way, why one of the biggest data points for me was when I started showing people and I'm in a sometimes what feels like teeth pulling process of trying to like convey even actually not even to but especially to very smart people because the leaning of the smarter you are, and you can't blame people for this, right? It's natural. The smarter you are, the easier it is to assume that the rest of the people are confused because For the most part, they are about a lot of things. People are very confused, right? And but when they're not, it's kind of hard to take you all of a sudden to like, no, no, no. There's sometimes what the majority sees is a very important data point for you to, and then if you see it for yourself, that's a whole other thing. But
Right.
before you see it for yourself, know that that kind of a interaction with it actually makes a difference. It holds a different element of surprise in it.
It's kind of like the difference between when you say to someone, there's a bug over there, or when they just, oh my God, freak out because
Yeah.
they notice the bug, right? Like they might not like it either way, but there's a difference when the person is truly stunned by what they're seeing, or when they're just like agreeing that there's something stunning there.
Yeah, it is just they're
Yeah.
playing along to appease you, or they want to make you
Yeah.
feel good. Like that's the difference. And by the way, that also happens. Like people, they kind of feel, maybe they feel the pressure that like they've, you know, the, like maybe they feel that like I need them to see this or something, and then when they see the shaves, they kind of act that out, and I can see it and whatever. And then when they see the code, they're like, oh, and then they do that thing, right?
Right.
Um, and in the end of the day, for me, like I said, I'm interested in what's true. So, and this was also a thing that I was, heavily involved with recently, which is mapping this onto what in fact that means, because I have my convictions that are also resting heavily on what I'm experiencing, which is, the console and other things that I'm seeing in the space, which is like very concrete structures. But there, if I'm an example of one, then it's not really, I don't expect it to hold water in any serious intellectual circles or scientific circles, right? But I am now discovering that there's, well, not a lot, but I met two other people that see these extra domains, extra uh, concrete structures in the space without the laser, the same ones that I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this guy, Tom Matt, I think, Matte. Somebody told me about him. I've started doing daily live streamings, and actually, one of the people that saw me on your podcast also joined us, which was wonderful. And somebody told me about this guy, and apparently there's this guy Tom Matt. I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but I'm assuming it's Matt. Um, and he had basically a mental breakdown. I think like 10 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. He wrote a book about this, and he was an executive in some advertising firm, if I'm not mistaken. He literally just went like full on mental breakdown from substances. He lost his job, or more accurately, just basically just spent a bunch of money and left his job, left his family. It was a very painful time of his life. Became homeless for a while, and then I guess he realized that he had to kind of, bring himself back. And he was lucky enough to have, I guess, enough family members, if I understood this story correctly. But basically, he kind of like brought himself back. But what was interesting is that there was one ability from all these like, delusions that seemed to have stayed. And he says it did not feel like a delusion. So it's almost like with all the noise, there was one thing that stayed and it did not look like a delusion. But now, how am I communicating this to the world? They're like, I was just the crazy guy a second ago. I know that, you know that. How am I now convincing you that no, 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 but this one thing is real? Like, how, imagine, right? Like, it's so hard to do.
Yep.
And he's like, well, he said, the first thing I got to do is show everybody that I'm clean. So then he cleaned himself up. He, like, brought himself back to like normality. And this ability that he now calls upsight.
Right.
But he can, oh, you're familiar, right?
Well, the person who turned me on to you told me about this.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So then
Yeah.
exactly. So I didn't know
But
about
you can continue saying it because the people who are listening
yeah,
don't
yeah,
know
yeah.
it.
And basically he sees a very realistic, like very, very space realistic objects in front of him if he wants to naturally, which is something that I definitely can't do. But to people that don't know, they can go and look up on the Dango Thoughts channel. They can watch a video called The Console, where I'm talking about the details, and I have a 3D
Yep.
illustration of what I'm seeing. But essentially every time I smoke the molecule, there's a computer console that opens in front of me, and I do mean like straight up Tony Stark, augmented reality, screens, the whole 9 yards. Like everything is just kind of hovers around me. Very complex, very beautiful, futuristic thing. And what he describes is very similar to that, only he claims that he can do it naturally. Well, claims I saw him talk. I have no reason to doubt what he's saying is true. And he somehow managed to maintain this ability naturally. And he says like sometimes it would have like very visual things. It would show me like shapes that are technically impossible, and I would understand them. They're like more than three-dimensional. And that's his life now. Like he wrote a book about it. He does public speaking. He does, that's all he does. I actually reached out to him on Insta. I haven't really checked I was on the meditation retreat for less than days, so I haven't checked my, social media and stuff. We'll see. I reached out. Apparently, he reached out to Dean Radin, which is a known
Mhm.
scientist who
I know
studies a
who
lot
it is,
of,
yeah.
yeah, paranormal things. And if I again, if I'm, if I'm getting some of this wrong, then people can find out. But from what I understand, he did some tests with him, and the way, for example, which I never thought about, it's interesting. He said that the reason that we know that I'm actually seeing a real thing and not like a hallucinations is that I'm tracking it with my eyes, which you cannot do unless there's an object in front of you. Because if you
Right.
just try and go across the room, your eyes will always have this little jump. They only stay stable, glide, if you have an actual object that you're focusing on.
Yep. That
Okay.
makes sense. Yep.
And that I never thought about that. That's a great way to distinguish between, the different layers. So I do know that the people are experiencing more of this stuff, obviously. I also know that this is some kind of a big transformation that is happening that we're all feeling in different ways, both in, world events and on our personal lives. I'm sure, like you said, there's big ups and downs now, like with the, something is rocking the boat. So there's definitely something big happening. And because of that, I'm doing everything I can to be as loyal to the facts as I possibly can, because it's relatively easy to all of a sudden like just, exaggerate here, confabulate there, and it's you got to keep it like exactly here. And at the same time, also maybe become a little bit more comfortable with certain ideas that they don't they don't necessarily play a big role in the way that I perceive reality, right? But ideas like God and ideas like, like angelic beings, things like that. Like
Mhm.
this language usually to me is just, to me personally, I mean, always felt unnecessarily um, obscuring the facts. It's like even if that thing exists, whatever it is, I think calling it God and angels does nothing but kind of confuses the mind, because it has a connotation, it has this particular vibe that we attribute to because of our stories and whatever. But I am seeing some of these motifs and elements in the space. Like I'm seeing things that I did not expect to see, because it never, I was an atheist my whole life. It was never even in the back of my mind, like not even a little bit. It's not like I was a closeted religious person and then, I
Yep.
discovered it. And I see like motifs like Jesus Christ. Like, and I'm like, whoa, okay. The, it actually makes me very uncomfortable, if
Hmm.
I have to be honest, because it's like, well, I think first it's if any of this is true, or at least the communication that comes is saying, well, whatever you believe about that thing, you have your version of it, but that actual thing is real. This is actually happening. Okay, so there's the ego element, which you have to kind of, reshape what you thought is true and spent a lot of time arguing against. On the other hand, there's the other side, which I'm always trying to keep it in the middle, that says, okay, but we always understand more. We're in a new time, we have a new paradigm, we have a deeper understanding of reality. Maybe if it is true, all that stuff back then, the only way to communicate it to people who didn't even know what electricity was look, just focus on 10 commandments and you'll be good. Like, don't worry about it. Okay. Now that we do understand what electricity is, what technology is, what computation is, maybe it'll be a little easier to explain really more closer to what it really is. And yes, ultimately, probably the ultimate object, whatever it might be, is true by definition unfathomable to anything that is not it. But there has to be a rising scale of understanding that allows for a deeper understanding of what it truly is. And I do think that that's also important, because if I have to be honest, if I have to paint the perfect picture, I want our humanity to keep advancing technologically in a responsible way, in a way that then takes nature into account, doesn't create, dissonance in nature or in what we call the rest of nature, because we are also nature. But like basically be more harmonious, be more holistic, all the good stuff, right? Like we want to bring that into the picture, but I don't want technological progress to stop. I think it's part of the beauty of nature and what it's trying to do. I am, I think that, again, this is what my impression at the moment is, like this this movement of people that are trying to, the whole rhetoric of like stepping back, right? The whole rhetoric of let's go back kind of like to more archaic values. Let's be more like smaller communes. Let's maybe relax with the technology, all that stuff. It it's funny because I understand that, like right now, it, it always feels better when you step away from the city and you go and sit down by, just there's a campfire and telling stories, slowing down, talking to each other. I did just a Vipassana retreat, which is just you literally silent for 10 days. There's like when the energy goes down, you definitely psychologically you definitely feel healthier, right? However, big picture, I always say this, like you can sing Kumbaya around a campfire all you want, but eventually the sun will become a red giant and will engulf the earth. So it's gonna be a big campfire, right? So there's an intelligence test that also has to be cleared as well. I think that they're two projects and they should go together. Uh, and humanity tends to be overreactive. It's almost like it's our nature. Like whenever something, we look at all the social media and all technology and we say, "Oh, that is technology." No, like no, and that's it. And it's just like, okay, but no, that you're overshooting again. Can you can you can you take it in the middle, please? It's like that's not technology. That is the current reflection of what we are through technology. However, we can also create a technology that is informed by a different kind of human. So yes, maybe we need to take a step back just to conform maybe, and maybe learn again how to maybe comport ourselves a little bit different in relationship to nature, to each other, chill, okay? But at the same time, then still allow the new technology to be informed by that, because that extension is also trying to arise and it's also natural and it's also necessary because you do want a multi-planetary civilization, all that stuff. So I guess I'm just giving you a very big overview of what my when my heart and mind sits together, and I'm trying to make this into something that is coherent, inspiring, and an image that people want to strive towards. Um, because I almost get like literally my heart just like goes like when people go like, no, that's it. I mean, obviously it's also not really stoppable. It's You can't really stop technology. That's natural process of things. But I want to find a way to inspire people to want that more, which is there's nothing that is more exciting than like us populating the galaxy, but again, not the crazy version of us, not the ones that just goes from planet to planet and rapes every planet and just leaves mayhem. Like obviously not that, right? But wouldn't it be amazing if we learn how to harness certain green technologies and then we go from planet to planet, with terraform the planets that are just kind of like kind of just rocky and dead, and then we take them and we make them into a paradise with gliding hills and beautiful animals and lush forestry and all of that stuff. And there you go. Here's another garden. Here's another garden. So in that sense, we can actually be the what I call uh, the divine technology
Yep.
of the universe.
Yeah.
That's really what my being is trying to aim towards.
So what you just said, the way you just sort of described all of that, like this is actually why I like you so much. I resonate highly with what you're trying to express and the way you're trying to go about it. I also came from a background of being completely an atheist. And then I had some experiences where like I would be lying to myself and to everyone else if I didn't have to acknowledge there is something that is very challenging to explain that lies beyond the material, hard and fast, right here, right now. And the magical moments I have had with it, like, I can't lie about that. I can't deny that, right? And I was raised completely without religion, right? Like, my father by birth is Jewish, and my mother by birth is, her dad was Protestant and her mom was Christian Scientist, but they did not raise me with any of that dogma, right? We didn't go to church, we didn't go to temple unless it was for like a wedding or something like that, right? And I had no reason to believe, like, my sister had imaginary friends, I didn't even have that stuff. Or the only thing I would say that was in any way sort of mystical or out there about myself as a kid is that I did always have the feeling that there was something going on that the adults weren't telling me about. Like, there was what you thought was going on, and there was what was really going on, and the two things were not the same. But I did not in any way ascribe that to anything otherworldly or some other being or whatever. I just knew that there was like what I thought I understood, and then something beyond that, but I couldn't get at it, right?
Oh, that's just healthy paranoia.
I definitely, right? Just because you're paranoid doesn't mean it's not true, right? Okay, so this has been that for me as well. Like, once I had some of these experiences that let me know that there was something a little more or a little extra, right? I had to like be gracious in my considerations of what some other people told me their experiences were, just to sort of like try and not just reject it because it sounds like something different than what I know or what I'm comfortable with or whatever. And over time, particularly when I take myself into an extended experience, either through drugs, or through extreme exercise, or like other things that take you outside of like your normal lane on the highway, right? I have seen things that I may perceive as something different than what these people are saying the religious iconography means they are, but I'm seeing the actual artifact or symbol that they are talking about, right? And I can see how, if you didn't know what something meant, but you kept seeing it everywhere, you may begin to think it was something very important and very powerful. And if there was people out there that could tell you something about it, whether they're telling you the truth or not, it sounds like more than you know about it, then these stories that morph themselves into religious doctrine over time could start to become the explanation for simply what something is. Right. And so I've seen the what you're talking about. There's a guy that I feel like does a really good job at explaining some of this. He's passed, I believe now, but his name is Bill Donahue. And he had been like a religious guy, like a pastor. And then he discovered the distortions around religion and like what was really being talked about. And a lot of it really does have to do with electricity and sonics and optics and you know, but there's sort of fields of energy around these things that come together that seem almost magical, that have an energy to them that some want to personify. And that's why these like stories of these characters come about, right? And so if I'm able to listen to the things people have to say from a fairly neutral perspective and just hear it and then go sit with it and kind of run it through my filter, I can usually come to some agreement about what it is we're talking about, even if we disagree about what the actual meaning or importance ultimately.
You know what they're trying to tell you, basically.
Yes.
And then you meet them halfway. There's much
Yes.
more charity involved because you're like, oh, it's not exactly what I heard, so that's bullshit. Versus like, oh, okay, I know what you're trying to say. The terminology doesn't really matter all that much. Continue.
Right.
Basically.
So like a lot of times there is something that is creating an energy or an effect, and then it's in the external environment. And the way you perceive it is where what's inside of you meets what's out here. And you're coming at it with your own set of experiences, your own things that you know and don't know, your own fears, your own hopes. And you're seeing the same thing that I'm seeing, but I'm running it through my own stuff. We're literally talking about the same thing, but ascribing different meaning and therefore value to it, right? And like that's been one of the things I've been trying to be super disciplined with myself since I got clean from drugs. Because the guy you were describing, I had a very similar experience. I discovered there's much more to whatever the fuck this is that we're in when I was a tweaker, right? And I knew that I needed to be able to talk about it. And I knew that I needed people to take me seriously because some of this, I was not a person who was prone to like the usual delusions you would hear people talking about in that space. Like there would always be something there that I could kind of grab onto and go, well, wait a second, this can't be a hallucination. But because I have no job, I can't keep money in my bank account, like I sleep for 3 days when I'm coming down, I've got like scars all over my face from picking, no one is going to take me seriously. I have got to pull myself out of this. I have to make myself a respectable person. And then I have to go as close as I can go into that space again without falling in, and work really hard to explain it to anyone who's curious in a way that they can understand what it is I'm talking about, right? And I feel like I'm not, I haven't been 100% successful yet, but I'm getting better and better and better at it. And some of the stories that I've been telling since I very first had a YouTube channel or whatever all these years ago. And in the beginning, it was not polished and it sounded cuckoo. And now people know exactly what I'm talking about and they can go out and prove it to themselves and find it for themselves in a similar, different stuff, but similar way that you've been doing with what you talked about and what Tom Matt is talking about or whatever it is. So I think that there.
I have a perfect example of that, by the way. We discovered this with a friend of mine inadvertently. That we were talking about the same thing, but we had a completely different terminology for it.
Yeah.
So he has a band and they do, music videos and stuff. And then one of the music videos, he kept on telling me that the DMT space feels organic and not technological to him. And I was like,
Mhm.
really? It's like, I don't, that's so weird to, I'm like, it feels super just technology to me. Like I never feel like, organic elements. It's not like mushrooms for me. So it's the same spectrum of visuals for sure, but it's like a different portion of the channel. Like it's just super futuristic gears, technology, screen. And he's like, no, it feels organic. I was like, that is so bizarre. I've never heard this before. And then we were watching, oh, and then he pulls up one of his music videos and he says, oh, look, sometimes I put like subliminal messages in it. And people don't know, but like I'm putting it there. It's, kind of like, if you know kind of thing, right? And then he kind of puts this, he's like, look how we did this like really organic graphic, like coming out of a person. And I'm looking at it, I was like, this, this light? He's like, yeah. I'm like, this is organic to you? He's like, yeah. I'm like, that's like super futuristic technology to me. He's like, yeah, yeah. I'm like, no, that's technology, bro. He's like, no, that's organic. I'm like, that's crazy. Like we were saying the same thing. For you, just that's how you perceive biology for some reason, by the way. I don't
Mhm.
know why that's how you
Right?
perceive
Yeah.
biology. But it's like because it was like the glowing iridescent color looks like a super flashy light, right? So I'm like, why would this be biology to you? But it is. So here's a perfect example where just by mistake we discovered, oh, we are saying the same thing. It's just that you have the word is attached to something else inside of you, basically.
I think sometimes people who are artists versus people who are mathematicians or scientists, they have a different idea of what is organic and what is synthetic or technological. One of the things that, like, have you ever been to? I know you live in Southern California, which is where I'm from. Like, my dad lives just a few miles from where you are right now, right? So have you been to Joshua Tree?
Yeah, of course.
Okay, so there's an area between Palm Springs and Joshua Tree called Hidden Passage Ranch that my girlfriend and I went to, and we sat outside and we ate mushrooms and had our trip. But at the end of the trip, so not like when it was the most strong, we started watching the stars in the sky, right? Before that, we were kind of closing our eyes and just whatever we were doing, we were doing. But we were started watching up, and there's this like dome up there that it's like I think it's a vibrational dome. I don't think it's like a ice or glass like some people say, like a firmament. I think it's like some sort of membrane, like a plasma membrane that's
A lot of
vibration.
people say this, that, right?
Yeah,
In the
yeah.
sky, a lot of people say that.
Do you know what the Flammarion engraving is?
Yeah, I know.
I'm going to show you real fast what it is because it's a good okay, so it's like a famous image, but it kind of was like this, right? So this is the Flammarion engraving.
Ah, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so what it looked like up there was that there was this dome, a vibrational dome that had quatrefoils, which are like a geometric shape, like that was like a wallpaper on the top of it, right? Like the whole thing was covered in this wallpaper, and there was these ships, for lack of a better term, or something that was coming from outside of it, coming through it, and then proceeding across inside the dome. And when it would come through, like it was like vibrating through, and when it would come through, it would like trail geometry behind it, like it had folded itself up like origami or like in a dinkra. And then once to get through, and then once it was through, it opened, and you could almost see the template of how it got like that. So you'd see it come through, and you'd be like, look at that one. And as soon as you said, look at that one, it would like do something with its lights and start going across the sky, right? But in those, so we think of UFOs or ships or whatever it is as being sort of technological, right? But you see these things here, the things that are the stars right there.
Yeah.
Okay, so the wallpaper was kind of like this. A quatrefoil is a little bit different than this, but
Okay.
that was the whole wallpaper, and it was almost like those are things you could kind of come through. But when it came through, like, and it opened up from its geometry, it sort of oriented itself to looking like this, right? Now, if you go, my girlfriend is a cranial sacral therapist, right? That's
Okay.
like a therapy that works on the cranial nerves in the brain. And she has this book called Brain Stars. And in the book called Brain Stars, it shows that the lining on the inside of your head has things on it that look just like those stars. They're called glia, right? So whatever humans are doing, whether we're projecting our minds onto the great canvas above, or whether the universe external to us is very similar to the universe internal, something that is part of our biology mimics what looks like a very futuristic technological event happening in the skies above, right?
Mm.
So if I say UFO to you, you're going to think technology, right?
Most likely, yeah.
But if I say brain lining to you, you're going to think biology, right? So one
Yeah.
would be technological and one would be organic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like the same thing.
Yeah, I guess you can say that. I'm talking more in the way that it feels. So like biology is more like warm, messy. It's kind of like not,
Right,
there's like a clean energy to like when you're talking about like a neutron star, even though it's just as chaotic, right?
right.
Well, actually neutron stars it's not chaotic, but like movements inside of a star, let's say, right? So even though it's like all like I guess you can call it more biological in the sense that it's like bubbling like a soup, right? Um, it's there's a certain there's like a
It's symmetrical.
OCD level, more like it's it's not like everything goes kind of feel.
No, it
That's
feels
that
more
quality.
it feels more
Yeah,
symmetrical, and more sort of like perfectly produced.
yeah,
Not yes, I understand what you're talking about. Okay, so but I've had, the reason I just asked is because I've had this experience with people too, where like an experience that I think feels very natural and organic, someone else is like, oh, that felt like a technological
yeah.
imposition on my
That no, but what you're
conscious.
saying, by the way, is extremely informative. Also, it's like very interesting, and also, there's a lot of things that are happening in the space that point to the fact that there's some kind of a like a line here that kind of
Yes.
ends, and the rest of it, it's almost like whatever your periphery is already kind of like a projection, like
Yeah.
an extra. So, because the reason I know this is because one time I was staring at the sun, not at the sun, but I was outside and I was on the molecule. And then I stepped back inside, and it was literally like a line that like burned itself here, like a long line. I was like, why is it there? It's almost like there was like an end of something here, and I was like,
Yep.
what is that? So yeah, so there's like, and many times they would tell me like in the space, they would tell me like, look up, and it's like, where? And I never understand what they want. I'm like this, like with my eyes up there, like what do you want me to do? Because it's like they're saying no, look up, there's something above, and when you look really like up with your eyes, you'll
Yep.
see that there's almost like a different content right above here, above inside your skull. There's a different content happening versus here, which so it goes directly to what you're saying. What you said, your friend researcher, this is something like talking about like mainstream science. We know that there's some kind
But
of a
she's So she's a cranial sacral therapist. It's like she's a physical therapist, and it's a therapy that you can do like on somebody's like
Oh, so you're saying
neck
there's
and
some kind
stuff.
of like
Cranial
a
nerves.
the cranial nerves sit inside of a interesting. Okay.
So
Huh.
there's this layer, there's like a membrane between like where your skull is and like your scalp. And in there, there's these things called glia or brain stars that are like some type of little like synapse or something, which is kind of like what a star is, right? Like, and they look
Well,
almost
no, but
exact, right? They
see,
look
this is where we're jumping. But yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
right,
I see the I see like how you can interpret neurons and the way that they kind of like all connect together to like these stars. But I do think that if that, unless you have a lot of other elements that connect similarly, I would say that's a stretch. That-
I'm not saying that they're objectively the same
No,
thing.
I'm saying that even
Yeah,
functionally. So like in order to compare something, you have to compare it in a way that either functionally, like let's say, stars would have information moving through them. And maybe
right.
there is. I don't know. But as far as we know now, there isn't. So in that sense, and neurons are specifically they're made to transfer electricity through biochemical interaction, right? So that's a very different function than a star, right? As far as we know
As
today.
far as we know.
Right, but we,
Right.
we have to go by what we know. If it would be producing light, that would be one point of comparison. Just because they kind of look similar and they distribute it similar, to me, that's not enough of a point of comparison. However, all of that being said, I do agree that there's something very interesting about the reflection between how whatever is happening right too close to us to even know there's a thing there.
Yep.
Whatever is outside is projected outwards.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that literally that was what was
No, no,
happening.
of course not. But
Yeah.
for me, it's even like not a good point of comparison. But you know me already. I'm
Yes.
just, I'm
You
very
tend.
anal about these things.
So it was funny when last time we did a show, like
Yeah.
my audience was all like, maybe one day he'll give up his belief in science, right? And I'm kind of like, yes, but that would be like you giving up your belief in conspiracy, right? So like it's just kind of the angle that
But
you
they're
kind
not.
of come at it from.
This is a very important point. They really are not the same. So there's a in the center. You know what the original use of the word meme is?
Like why I'm familiar with like memetics in general.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the original idea was originated with Richard Dawkins, in one of his I think books from the 70s, if I'm not mistaken. But basically, the idea of a meme, the way it's originally used, is that it's the smallest unit of the smallest replicator of an idea.
Yes.
So that's why it's called a meme, because it's like a gene. Okay. And basically it's another replicator, like a gene. And if it gets into your brain, the definition of it is that if it's a meme, what it would try and do is try and cause
Oh,
itself to be replicated in your brain. So
yeah.
repeat the idea, and also repeat it to others. So that way it infects or will
Right.
transmits itself to other minds, right? And by the way, it's used more than a metaphor. Like it's not a metaphor, like it's an actual like information replicator, right?
Right.
So a good joke is a meme. Okay, there's a the idea. So the idea that the government is lying to you. Okay, for example, wait. So people would just say it. No, by the way, this
Right.
is to be clear. A meme is not a degrading term.
I agree. Yeah.
There are a lot of memes in science. I'll get to that in a moment. But it's important for me to illustrate this difference. To say, but the government is lying to us. That's a meme. It's easy to repeat. It has a strong emotional response, and it infects other minds very clearly, very easily. Because if you have a lot of other things that kind of sit with that, it's an
Right.
active. You get it into your brain. You go like, oh yeah, yes, the government is lying to us. How are they lying to us? Doesn't matter, man. They're lying to us. That's a meme. Okay,
I
we
agree
don't
with
want
you.
to go into specifics,
I
but just
agree.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now the culture. So just like there's a gene plex, which is a collection of genes that together make a very complex things happen, there's something called a memeplex. Culture is a collection of memplexes, or you can say it's a very large memeplex, okay? And essentially what it is every culture has its operative memplexes that
Right.
causes it to behave a certain way. Uh, Scientific community, the memeplex is we respect evidence.
Yeah.
Don't just buy into something just because somebody said so. People are not reliable witnesses. All of these are separate memes, okay?
Right.
easy to repeat, easy to remember, has an emotional thing, right? And together they contrive the memeplex. Okay, one memeplex. The other memeplex, the whole conspiracy theory memeplex, contrived an infinite number of the
Totally.
government's lying to
100%. Right.
big pharma, bad. Billionaire, bad. I don't care, bad. But if you look closely, together, the memeplex usually is revolving around a central mass, and that mass is some kind of a central what's the word I'm looking for? It's a virtue. Okay, there's
Right.
a central
Yeah,
virtue
yeah, yeah.
that people have different versions of that they want to act out. So they
Right.
find the memeplexes that are the best to give them the best ground
Correct.
in which they can enact this virtue. Okay,
Yes.
the virtue of science is knowledge. I want to understand the world better. Okay, that's the only thing that matters or should matter.
Right. Real
You know,
science. Real science.
right, right. No, so
Yeah.
within that, it's a
Right.
human enterprise. It's messy. People lie, people steal, people cheat each other from grants. All of that stuff. That's just human. Okay,
Right.
but the central thing that is trying to be enacted on the pure thing is we just want to understand the world.
I
Okay,
agree. Yes.
right. The central theme, the central virtue of all conspiracy theories, all of them in the center is I do not trust institutions. I do not trust power. Full stop. Okay. That's the only thing. This is why you can never convince a flat earther of anything else because no, I will tell
Yeah, no,
yeah. Not because they're dumb. There's a lot of very smart people that will subscribe to this. Because this you're talking to the wrong virtue. You're talking to the virtue of knowledge. And you're like, wait, how do you from the virtue of knowledge? Like, how can you? I'm showing you the evidence. How can you not see? That's not the virtue. The virtue is if you trust anything that
Right.
anything large told you, you're a sheep.
So
That's
the
I don't
assess
care.
so
Eh,
the assessment you just gave, I actually agree with. And one of the things that has happened for me over the last several years, like I was hardcore in like the deepest, weirdest fucking conspiratorial realms you can imagine for a decade and a half, right? And I also like, you know, respect my own intellect enough to acknowledge when certain things don't hold water for me anymore because I've been swimming around in them and for in that pool for a long time, and I'm like at a certain point I'm like, this is really more piss than it is water. Right. I have to be honest with myself.
And it's an interesting word. I don't mean to cut you off because you said piss. I know that you just meant it as a joke, but at the bottom of that, there's an emotion. And the emotion behind the conspiracy theories is fear, pissed, anger. And
Right.
the virtue from the other side is it can be invoke also anger, but it's mostly around, oh, I just want a relationship with nature. That's why it's different. Like I want to understand versus I want to just let you know that you're in danger no matter what. It's like very fear-based.
So
Yeah.
I agree. I mean, my assessment at this point, even there were lines of research that I spent years and years and years going down. And even though I found things that I knew were provably true, it wasn't getting me to where I was trying to go. And so I had to ask myself the question, like, what else could be true? What could be another explanation for the things that I am seeing that I know to be true because like there's evidence that they are, but that could kind of cause the same thing without like the most conspiratorial explanation possible being the one that is sort of creating this scenario. And what I started to find when I did that was far more interesting and actually helped me to get to the answers that I was getting at. So some people for the last, this has been going on for probably like pretty heavily for 2 or 3 years, but really for 4 or 5 altogether, where I've been probably some people would call it backing away from things I used to believe. which
Mhm.
for me, it isn't really backing away. It's like I pounded as hard as I could on that wall and I needed a different set of tools. And the set of tools that I found, unfortunately, don't come from the pool of answers that are acceptable in the conspiratorial sort of realm. And so for some people, they don't like it. For others, they're like, oh, okay, no, I can see what you're talking about. It makes sense. So like I think a lot of the conspiracies that people claim, while they are the best conspiracies are the ones that are true but not the point. So while they might be true, that isn't necessarily why something is happening. And if that becomes the end point of your search for truth, then you're not really going to know the thing that is like, supposedly all the people in the conspiracy realm are like, they want the truth no matter what it is, no
No,
matter,
they don't.
right, right, but
It's
that
absolutely not true.
but
Yeah, yeah,
that's supposedly what it
but that's
is.
what they think. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. And I had to acknowledge to myself that I had been like dancing around the same spot for a really long time without getting anywhere, which was where I was really trying to get. And
Yeah.
so I think the issue when it comes to science, right, is that many people who claim that they're part of a scientific community that is motivated by the virtue of knowledge have been dishonest, and they have been placed in positions of authority over people who have these questions. And now people are ready to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because unfortunately, some people who claim to represent the science and have positions of authority have abused that their understanding of that realm in a way that creates the unfortunate situation that you're talking about.
But that is also very natural because it's just human behavior.
Human behavior,
Yeah,
totally.
and the final thing I will say about this is that ultimately it's not even that, because if you ask yourself, okay, but what's wrong with just suspecting everything? Why is that wrong? It's not. It's just not conducive to the world we live in.
Right.
You disappeared on me for a second.
I see
Can
you're,
you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Um, yeah, I don't know why it like went really, really slow for a
It went
second.
weird for,
So
yeah.
yeah, so it basically, yeah, yeah. So it's not, it's just not, the whole thing of evolution is not, it's not survival of the fittest. It's survival of the fittest gene pool for that particular environment.
Correct.
So
That's
if
exactly
you're
it. That's exactly it.
if you're really strong, okay, but all you need here is to be able to breathe underwater. Good luck with that, right? It's not what you fit for the wrong thing.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong in principle about suspecting everything. It is just that if you look at what the scientific memeplex produced with all the lying and all the stealing and all the nonsense, with all the people that don't believe in, like, they hate big pharma, but if you go to a hospital right now and they're going to amputate something, oh, you're going to be so thankful for big
It's
pharma.
true.
Oh
It's
man, you're going to
true.
be so thankful for big pharma. And this is the thing. Institutions are important in order to make big things happen. If you believe we should never make big things happen, then you're absolutely in the right and you have a coherent mindset about we should not have these things. But an individual or a group of friends can never build an iPhone, can never build a rocket,
Did you see
can
it just said 1111? Your iPhones, when you
yeah,
held it up, it said
boom. See?
1111.
Yeah, exactly. Truth, right?
Yeah.
So you have to have a balanced view. It's not like you should never criticize institutions, very important. However, when you overdo it, you are fit for the wrong thing because the environment that we need to be in order to be suspecting of everything is one in which everything is constantly trying to kill us. And then probably these are the people that are going to survive more. So in that case, I'll say all the power to you. Thank God you're here because I don't have that gene right now that makes me suspect everything. Thank God you're here to suspect for everything for me because I wouldn't be paying attention and I would be killed. Thank you. Right.
Right.
But right now we live in a world in which, even though, like always, there's always fuckery going on, people can always be assholes, people in power will always be try and pull more things. This is natural. This is not news. You didn't announce news right now, right? But they produced everything you're using around you. Beautiful thing. The computer we're speaking from right now, the biggest corporation in the world made it. It's like, it's like, am I grateful for that? Yes. Should I be criticizing some of their products to make them better? Yes. Do I think they're selling babies in in some underground market? If I would think twice. Even though I like their products, I would think twice if I want to buy them, or maybe I want to do something about it. But the action of really believing this stuff all day
Right. I agree.
does more harm to you as a person because of the amount of seething hate and anger that you have inside of you, because it is not a good emotion. It's not good for you. It causes cancer. It's like all that stuff, right? You would be much better off to have a healthy relationship with authority, which is like, look, uh, I'm gonna respect as much as of it as I feel like as I have to. I will, to the extent that I think my words matter, influencing other people or in social media, whatever. I will criticize what I want to criticize, but I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like my shit that doesn't stink.
There's nothing.
It's like, dude, the person when people say the government, people
Yeah.
don't realize it's literally just Bill and Bob showing up in the morning having coffee, like, hey Bill, how was your weekend? Oh, it was good. It's not some secret cabal. Most like it's just like people like you and I, right? And that, but it's not as sexy. This idea is not as sexy. The government is one of the most boring organizations in the world.
That's true.
If you're talking about like X-Files shit,
Right.
okay, but that's not the government. Trust me. The government will never be able to do that. That's maybe some secret organization. And I'm not even saying they don't exist. I'm pretty convinced they exist. However, the the level of influence you ever gonna have on it, that I think that you kind of like dancing on the line of delusion if you think you will ever have anything to say that will change that aspect of it. All you can do is change yourself.
So I actually, there's almost nothing you said there that I don't completely agree with, right? I found, for me at a certain point, I found that living my life where there was a cabal that was controlling everything and it wasn't fair was not effective for me, right? So I had to find a different way, but that, right? But I needed to go through that, right? Like, I feel like the people who are doing that right now, the people who, who that is everything. Like, you have to go through sort of some of these paces sometimes and then walk yourself back to the place of, okay, well, like, what is actually like what can I take responsibility for? Like, what that is going on in my reality is actually something that I can do anything about, and then start changing yourself, and then it reorients your viewpoint on all of these other external things as well, right? So I want to two things to sort of put a bow on the thing that you just said and something you said earlier about finding that balance between technology and nature, and not like, oh, let's reject all the technology, but let's not go psychopathic dystopian with it. And also it sort of it creates some solution to some of this sort of conspiracy versus the science thing. Is I feel like people becoming more unified in a movement towards having the option to opt into things or opt out of things, rather than saying you have to do this or you can't do this type of thing, is probably the scenario that allows the kind of advancements that we're talking about to take place. And also people not feeling like they're forced into doing things that they feel uncomfortable with. And that's really complicated because everybody thinks that the answer that they think is right is the one that everyone else should have to live by. But I feel like that's the next sort of layer or frontier for people. I'm gonna play a little something in the second hour where you were explaining one of your experiences to my friends, Chris and Hunter from The Melt. Like, I do a show with
Oh,
them.
they're your friends. Oh, they're
Yeah, we
wonderful.
do shows, a lot of shows together. They're good
They're
friends.
wonderful.
Yeah. And in it, you were talking about like how feeling like some of these entities or molecule beings or whatever, sometimes they're like assessing you to see if you're sort of ready for the next layer of whatever the awareness or the information might be before you can sort of be read in on it. I'd say
More like I'm not that I won't fall apart psychologically. But
correct.
yeah.
Like, I think the same thing is happening for society at large. And I think this sort of squaring off between like the conspiratorial faction and then this like scientific faction here, like, this is part of this navigation of how we move through this time. I think is going to be is what's necessary to get to the place where we can have high technology that doesn't feel imposed on people and doesn't feel like it's sort of offensive to the nature of reality in a way that you can't come back from, right?
Come back. Yeah, well, we'll touch on these ideas later because the contentious nature of statements of this flavor are because you're talking about the ultimate bubble, the
Right,
ultimate snow globe of
right,
everything,
right.
literally nothing that isn't natural inside of it.
Correct.
Also, there's to come back from to what? It's whatever it is as it is. So that's where it becomes a
I
little.
said feels like you can't come back from. I didn't say you couldn't come back.
Oh, I
I
see. Yeah.
said feels like you
Yeah.
can't come back from, right? Because if I didn't say it, that's what I meant. Like sometimes something changes so profoundly that it feels like something that nothing will ever feel the same again.
Oh,
That
but that's also true. It's just that
right,
it's
right,
just how things are now. Okay.
right. But someone is a lot more, in my opinion, likely to agree to something. When I say progress, I'm not talking about like progressivism, like in politics. Someone is much more likely to agree to allow something to progress if it feels like there's still a way that they can ground out a little bit, or that they have a choice. Like, I don't want to, if I don't
Yeah.
have to if I don't want to. And then they'll see other people doing it and they're like, oh, maybe that's not so bad, I can do it now. I mean, now I feel okay to do it, right? So that's kind of more what I was saying. All right, last
I
thing
see
I want
what
to
you're
say,
saying. Yeah, go ahead.
last thing I want to say before we wrap up the first hour and move over into the supporter segment was, I don't know if you recall this, but when we did the show the first time, I showed you this kind of language that the observers used in the TV show Fringe, right? Let's see, it's this one
Yeah,
here.
remind me, please.
I don't know if you recall.
Vaguely. Okay.
Right, I
Yeah.
showed you this, and at the time that I showed you, you're like, oh wow, that's kind of similar to what it was, right? So
Yeah,
what?
I can see the similarity for sure. Yeah.
Okay, and so in
This
Fringe,
looks more like Korean.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
okay, but okay, so the in Fringe, I don't know if you ever saw the TV show. There were these beings from the future that they called observers, who had learned how to sort of live outside of time, but then insert themselves into the time stream at important moments in technological discovery or history or whatever it is, right?
Okay.
And they would write, when they were writing notes, like they would look through these interesting sort of binoculars that
Mhm.
would show them the same thing you and I are seeing in front of ourselves, but with like a matrix graph, like of coordinates on top of it, that whatever, and then they would write those notes after they
Mm,
looked at it, right?
interesting.
And in Fringe, right, in I think it was in season 5, where they were trying to like the group of people, the humans, were trying to save reality from the observers who've gotten carried away with their power and were destroying the future. They had to go find a magnet. They had to go find a very powerful magnet that somebody had been saving and hiding away from them, because they had been told that in the future these people would become looking for this magnet, and they would need the magnet in order to like send something through the time tunnel to save reality or whatever. So when you started telling me about,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm looking for the very powerful magnet.
There you go. I'm telling you, reality. Did you ever hear Elon Musk talking about how there's this book that he till this day doesn't believe is real? It's like he's like sometimes till this day I think it's fake. There's some kind of a story that futuristic science fiction novel that talks about the first colonies on Mars. And the Mars's governor in that book, his name is Elon. And it
I totally
and the
believe it. I
and the
totally
book
believe
and the book predates him. So he himself, he's like, it was a friend sent it to me, he said, and I was like, that's no, there's no way, like this is crazy.
this is how reality is. The level of synchronicity and weird stuff like that I live in all the time tells me that, like, however much you and I think that we're figuring out with all of these little things we whip up here or whatnot, like they may be true, but it's far stranger than even anything you and I can comprehend as to how this happens, right?
Oh, that's a given. I
Yeah.
There's a famous quote by I think it's Max Tegmark, but he always says, he's a famous physicist, and he always says,
Anyways.
if one, oh, okay, no, I'm just saying, maybe you don't, maybe the audience doesn't. One of his things he always says is that if one of the answers you found matches something you expected, most likely it's the wrong idea.
Mhm.
Because whatever it really is, you definitely should expect it to be something that is so out there that it's like, oh, okay, now we're playing in the right realm, basically.
I think there's like a both and, right? I constantly like I'm coming up with some idea. I'm like, oh, I think this is true, but I don't really believe it. I'm just saying it because that's what my mind thinks at the moment. And then later it turns out to be true. So I'm learning to like not doubt, like when I have an instinct that is often correct, but it's never the final answer. It's
Yeah,
just one of the stepping stones to the final answer, which is going to be the cuckoo thing that we could never expect.
that is the perfect attitude to take towards it.
Okay, we're gonna move over into the supporter segment where I have a few little video clips that I want to play for you and poke around on them a little bit. But before we do that, let people know where they can find you if they want to find out anything more about your Code of Reality project or any of the other things that you're up to.
So codeofreality.com, but honestly, most of my content at the moment is just my YouTube channel and my social media handles. So Dango Thoughts is my YouTube show, and on social media, it's just Danny Goler, one word, both Instagram and TikTok. I have an X account, but I'm barely active, so it's not even worth checking out. And that one is just Goler Danny. But Danny Goler, one word, TikTok and Instagram. Dango Thoughts on YouTube. Those are the three main things.
Okay, awesome.
And we're working on a documentary, and this is going to be very exciting. I'm going to be very excited to talk about it soon. I'll send you a trailer, and if you want, we can even later, if we have a little bit of time before the end, I can show you the trailer.
Yeah, you can show me. Yeah, for sure.
Perfect. So I'm actually going to run use the restroom real quick, and then
Okay,
we'll.
he's gonna go use the restroom. If you guys want to watch the rest of this conversation, you can go to patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. We will see you on the other side.